Tanks may be a lot stronger and supports are better duelists than ever, but DPS are still the best heroes for proactively carrying. If you're on the right character, know exactly where and how to play, and hit your shots when it matters, there's nothing stopping you from hitting champion. So let's get into how to carry every match as DPS. If you're looking to rank up on your favorite heroes, check out the link in the description below to get access to a GameLeap membership. There are tons of guides and courses that can level up your game and help you get better, faster. Make sure to check it out and enjoy the video. Starting with who to pick on what map. Although there are a lot of different map types in the game, there's really only two types of damage you want to deal: spamming down main or flanking from the sides. You can do both with some heroes like Echo and Reaper. They've got great damage on the front line but also have the mobility to set up on the flanks and win them. But even so, they pretty clearly have different ways of pressuring frontline and flanking. More on that later. Most of the time you'll want to stick to either role, spammy heroes for main and mobile duelists for the flanks. In order to properly carry, you have to fulfill your role to the max, by either winning in main or winning on the sidelines. And in order to consistently do that, you need heroes that have a massive advantage. So make your choice based on the map you're on. In close range maps, likely Giant Control Center, heroes like Cassidy and Sim with high mid-range damage work best in the front line, while Venture and Genji can approach from the flanks, taking advantage of the short distance to cross. Compare that to maps with longer sightlines, like Route 66. It's much more valuable to have an Ashe for the longer ranges in main and a Tracer to better navigate the equally long flanking paths. Although you can't control what your random teammates are going to play, having two flankers or two spammers isn't the end of the world, as long as you follow the next tip. Avoid stacking with your other DPS. A lot of players default to sitting behind their tank and spamming, but that's only a good option for both DPS if you're on a map with zero flanks, like Circuit Royale. Thankfully, there aren't many maps like it. If both of your DPS are together, you have way less map presence overall. Now that tanks are even tankier, most of them can handle damage from the front easily. Ramatra, Diva, Reinhardt, they all block damage exclusively in the direction they're facing. That's what makes it so important to split up your DPS for more angles of pressure. It's so hard for tanks to deal with. Even Sigma, who actually has two ways to block damage, can't match two angles for more than a few seconds. On the other side of things, having both of your DPS on the same flank makes it a lot easier for the enemy team to overwhelm your tank and supports while you're gone. Your team's front line will be a lot weaker without a main damage source, and the only tank and support line that can handle that is Wrecking Ball and Kiriko Lucio. Now, this doesn't mean that you never want to stack with your other DPS. Firstly, when you are in a rush comp, you mostly want to stick together as 5 when you push. But before you go for the rush, playing a second angle to get more space will always improve your team's survivability, which is super important for the composition. A rush team that runs in before clearing flankers can easily get their supports killed, so even in the stacking comp, you'll want to split to better set up your space. Another situation where stacking with your other DPS is fine is when you have an ultimate. There are a lot of brawling ultimates that reward stacking as a team to get the max value, especially Juno's. The whole reason why you want to split is to get an advantage from your team, but if your team is ulting, that's a pretty big advantage in and of itself. And finally, if your other DPS will help you win a duel on the side of the map, then you can go together, like Ashe and Tracer using Dynamite to win the Tracer duel. It's a win-win in that case, where the Tracer and Ashe both get free space. But usually, you want to support to help the Tracer, because it's much more consistent to use Dynamite on main and spam the front. Just remember to position based off of what your hero does better than the other DPS. If they're better at flanking but they're playing in main, or vice versa, they're trolling you. If you can switch to the other playstyle, like Echo and Reaper can, then go for it. But if you're an Ashe or a Cassidy and your Tracer is playing on top of your tank, don't overcompensate by hitting the flank. And likewise, if you're a Sombra setting up on the backline and your Hanzo joins you, you don't have to take up his role in main. The best you can do is kindly ask him to head back to the team. As long as you focus on playing the right position yourself though, you'll be doing more than enough. Next up, you'll want to focus on proper ultimate usage. One of the best ways to carry as any role is by constantly getting optimal value out of your ultimate, and the damage roll has a lot of different types of ults that don't always just make you win when you use it first. Some of them are great openers, while others are perfect counters to other ultimates. For example, Bob is great to counter with because he can instantly uppercut an aggressive push, and at the very least he deals a ton of damage that drains a ton of resources. And for starting the fight, Maze Blizzard works great because of his instant zoning and kill potential. It's really important to understand what your ultimate does best and set up for it. Ults are just so important for consistently winning fights or breaking holds. You can even pick your heroes based off of how good their ultimate is at attacking if you're on attack, or defending if you're on defense. So Pharah's Barrage is great to start with because of its burst, while a Cassidy on defense can use Deadeye to negate the advantage of an enemy attacking with Kitsune Rush. As a DPS, you can at the very least always be willing to use your ultimate to match ultimates more than start the fight. In the current meta with how strong tanks are, most DPS don't get enough value when they use ultimate to start the fight. Everyone has all their abilities and they can easily negate you. So you need to either approach from the flank or just take your time spamming looking to force the cooldowns that are stopping you from wiping the enemy team. On to the next tip. Focus on the enemy carry. Because of the vast range of skill between ranked players, both teams' players will vary in how much they're impacting the game. DPS have some of the biggest flexibility when it comes to countering the enemy team, mostly because of how many options there are. You can focus the tank if they're constantly taking space and winning the tank ability trade. If you don't deal enough damage into armor, it's really important for DPS to still help the focus fire when an enemy is being over-aggressive. Tanks can get value by pushing deep from the start of the fight, but if you deal enough damage to them that they have to get healed, the advantage switches over to you instead. It's a different deal when the enemy flankers are doing well. You can choose to mark them by always matching the position they're trying to take, the lane or flank they're trying to push. You can really limit test winning the duel, but just forcing abilities like deflect or recall or even Echo's flight will ease up the pressure on your team massively. It can also be the enemy supports that are doing a great job by constantly healing their team and getting massive utility value, either by using offensive abilities like Nade and Discord or sustaining their team with sustaining abilities like Zuzu and Immortality Field. As a DPS, you can easily force these abilities in the duel. Getting the kill outright can be difficult depending on the enemy team's setup, but the goal of forcing abilities to limit their impact is easily attainable. You'll clean up the kills by picking the right target to focus. It can even be a rival long-range DPS that you need to win the duel against, and in that case, you'll want to make sure that you always take that duel with support from your team. If you're going to be meeting each other in the front line, then you just have to make sure that your supports are capable of keeping you up. Now for one of the most important skills to use for every role, but most important for DPS, ping. With the damage roll passive, the heal reduction you apply will always make your targets easier to kill for you and the rest of your team as well, but getting your team to focus your targets just isn't consistent. But you can make it much easier by constantly pinging whoever you're targeting. If you can, rebind it to your side button on your mouse, so you can still deal maximum damage while also giving wall hacks to your team. If you can play like this consistently, it's like every one of your targets is marked for death. A ping through walls to show where they are and reduced healing as long as you damage them at least every other second. Because the tank passive is weakened, you'll really only want to pressure them when you have a hero that can break armor as well. But if it's Sigma or Zarya or one of the other tanks without armor, most DPS can force their abilities as long as you play for your own optimal range. As for choosing between DPS and supports to focus, choose the one that will either get the least healing or the hero that most of your teammates can shoot. That's part of why tank is still one of the best targets despite how absolutely busted their damage reduction is. And now for the final most important tip, die less. Even if this is the most obvious tip, it's by far the most important. It's not so much about playing safely and never taking risks, but understanding when you don't need to get kills to get value. If you pick a hero based on the situation, the map, and the enemy team comp, and then just play the right position, you don't even need to hit crazy headshots or one clips to win for your team. As long as your damage is consistent and you use your abilities effectively, like dodging enemy skill shots or hitting multiple enemies with an explosive ability, the enemy team will just be forced to make a move to avoid losing. And that's where you can clutch up with more risky plays when they're forced to split their attention. Carrying games as DPS takes a lot of discipline, since you need to play optimally and then hit all your shots too. But the role still has a lot of impact because you have such a massive variety of heroes to pick to counter with. And most of them have such strong damage output that you can focus any member of the enemy team to great success. And that's it for the best tips for how to carry every game as DPS. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. If you're looking to rank up on your favorite heroes, check out the link in the description below to get access to a GameLeap membership. There are tons of guides and courses that can level up your game and help you get better, faster.